Hello and welcome to my unusual tutorial on my own tutorials. So how did this all come about? Well, basically my subscribers. From time to time I'd get comments and emails for clarification of the various help videos that I've produced. Many questions asked of me were answered in videos leading up to the one in question. So what order should my help videos be viewed? Well, that's what this is all about. I now have on my website all my help videos chronologically in the order which they should be viewed. For example, if you are familiar with ninth chords but are having difficulty understanding 11ths, then I would strongly recommend you review the ninth chords before moving on to my help video on 11ths. My first video in the series looks at basic triads, major and minor. So if you don't already know about the 12 major scales, you would really need to learn about that before jumping in on the beginning of any of my tutorials. So let's take a quick look at the tutorial section of my website, followed by a quick review of the order you should follow. Once you arrive on my website, you'll get a little welcome message from me, but we're looking for a tutorial. So you want to come over to the right hand side, scroll down. Here you have a choice of various videos that I've put out, but this is what you're looking for here, tutorials. So you'll click on tutorials, and they are ranged from easy to more difficult, 1, 2, 3, etc. So on and so forth. Usually to about 32 covers what I think you'll be looking for. Down here are just some of my own observations of structure of music that I've analyzed. From 1 to 32, if you do them in order, you're going to get a lot more out of my tutorials than just jumping in and seeing what they look like. As I've already mentioned, the first tutorial is on major and minor triads. In that video I talk about various similar shapes, as in white, white, white. For 3 of the triads, a triangle shape of white, black, white. A reverse triangle of black, white, black. And 3 triads which have their own shape. Those triads cover all 12 keys. I also, of course, talk about their minor form. In the second tutorial, I add a 4th note to the triad. So remember, each learning video is an expansion of the previous one. In this tutorial, I talk about the 6th chord and the 7th. They couldn't be further apart. They're like day and night, and I explain the differences between those two. I also talk about their minor forms. The next video in the sequence of learning is to take these 4-note chords or triads and invert them into different positions, basically by flipping a note over top, such as this. I also talk about doing the same thing in the minor form, which I'm doing now. Here I discuss the terminology of the inversion as well as the concept of why slash chords relate to inversions. The next tutorial talks about major 7th chords. A beautiful sounding chord, used all the time. But we find out that it does have its problems because of the sharp dissonance that the chord does possess, and it is the only chord that encounters problems upon inversion, and we talk about that. We also talk about the fact that a major 7 can be interchanged with a 6, vice versa, but not with the 7. The next video moves into diminished chords. Interesting chord. Actually, there are only 3 of them in all the 12 keys. We learn the significance of the fact that a diminished 7 chord is an equal division of the octave in quarter sections. I discuss the difference between a half diminished and a diminished 7 chord. In the same video, I discuss augmented chords fact, they're special because they divide the octave into thirds. An interesting chord when I first heard it, didn't like it at all, was a suspended chord. Talk about this in the next video. I couldn't understand why anybody would want to play a chord that had such a strong tension to it and dissonance, until I realized that it was a suspended chord that resolved, which helped push our music forward. There's a little song, I'll just use an example, just 4 bars. I'll throw in a couple of suspensions just so you can hear how they work. Okay, the second bar coming up, we're going to go into a suspension here. There it is, resolving. This time I'm going to make the suspension the melody note. So you'll find out why we use suspensions and how they do keep our music moving forward. The 9th chord is next, and it is our first extended 5-note chord. It actually takes 2 hands to play the whole thing. We also learn about the variations of the 9th. The 9th chord, the augmented 9th, the flatted 9th, the major 9th, the minor 9th, and the 9/6. And in the same tutorial, I also described that 9th chords can be played like 13th chords with 1 hand. The next in the series, we talk about the 11th chord, probably one of the most misunderstood chords that there are out there. It's not surprising. If I play a C7 sus, F being the sus happens to be the same note as the C11, and they are totally different from one another. In that video, I described the difference between the two and how they all work. I also discuss variations of the 11th, as in minor 11ths, beautiful sounding chord. And the augmented 11th, which is used in jazz a lot. The 13th chord, next. It's the top dog, the most extended harmony that can be notated. Here we have a C13. We'll talk about a C13 augmented 11th, a C13 11, a C13 flat 9, and discuss even a major 13. My 10th video helps explain the concept of block chords, aka locked hands, because your hands are playing the chords in close proximity. It was the classic style of George Shearing, certainly Oscar Peterson, along with many other musicians. It does, however, have its limitations, and I get into that throughout the tutorial. Let me just give you a quick little example. I'll do a transition between the second verse of Misty into the bridge, and I think you'll get an idea of how it works. Okay, here they come. Also is an alternative version called the drop 2, and I get into that and explain that. I'll give you a little sample of that as well. Pick it up from the same spot. Okay, here we go with the drop 2. Well, time to wrap this up, but I would like to touch on just some must-see tutorials. One that comes to mind is the overtone series. I get a lot of hits on this. It provides us with the knowledge of the acoustic science behind open harmony voicings. Here we work on the basic structure between melody and bass. In open harmony patterns and relationships, part 1, part 2, we learn how the placement of the fifths and the sevenths play a big part in the overall balance between harmony changes. Then I threw in 3 fun tutorials, just to give us a break from all the theory. One is the structure of blues. We also learn the blues scale. Next video takes us into what makes something swing. And improvisation. Then we move back into the serious part of harmony and theory and everything else. What makes chords move around? And all of that is revealed. We take a quick look at tritones, a very important part, get a lot of hits on this because it is so important. Tritones are what makes things move around. What are they doing here? They're obviously resolving. That will help you understand what's going on in the tutorials which follow. They take you into primary chord movements, part 1 and 2, that's basically your 1, 4, 5 chord, and how they interact with each other, followed by secondary chord movements, part 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they're joined with the primary chord movements so that we have a big relationship between all the chords' primary and secondary movements. Tonicization slides in there, also known as secondary dominance. That comes in part 1, 2, and 3. You've heard them, you've played them all the time. This will explain what's going on musically that makes them work and why they're so important to our music. Then the whole thing takes place again, primary, secondary chord movements, but in minor. And that is very interesting once you get into the minor modes. So there you have it. I trust this unusual tutorial will be helpful to you and that my advice of this learning sequence will be beneficial to your learning experience. Thanks for watching, and if you're not already a subscriber, please do so and join our group. Bye for now.